Hey, hello, I'm Rianne Ribeiro, and I want to connect with you about peace and justice. We are interviewing women who labor for peace, as we have forever and always will, until we all feel peace in our homes, our workplaces, our communities, and especially our bodies and minds. This initiative is named Mujéres Co-Labor for Peace. It's a show of intimate conversations with justice workers who are healing their self and communities from the effects of misogyny, capitalism, and climate change. Welcome to the show. My name is Rianne Ribeiro, and I wish you complete wellness and lasting peace. This show is about taking steps, however small, to heal the effects of misogyny, capitalism, and climate change. And this episode is part 2 of an exploration of misogyny. My goal for the entire show is that you explore and reflect upon some important topics with me that you might not otherwise immerse yourself in, and that afterwards you feel a bit more inspired and peaceful about life. The idea here is to arrive in this show in your body, not just your head, and begin each episode with an inquiry of the self, asking ourselves, how is this beating a heart? It may feel awkward to some folks, and that's okay. This is how we grow through discomfort, one small step at a time. I ask myself this, and I'll ask you to arrive here with a reflection on what is on your heart in this moment. A moment ago, I checked in on my heart, and I found surprise and joy. And I'm finding right now stability and rootedness. There's a lot there. How is your heart? The invitation is for us all to further reflect on our hearts as we take a couple of slow, deep breaths of integration. That always feels good. The intimate conversation today is about understanding misogyny and taking steps to get beyond it. This is the second in what is becoming a series, as I have yet to address many of the facets of misogyny that motivated the tenet of this show. We ended the first episode on misogyny with some really provoking examples of misogynistic behaviors to correct. And there are so many, but we'll save that exploration for discussions with guests on the show. We also shared a reference to bonobo apes living in a matrilineal society and the fact that family relationships in primates are consistently organized through mothers, not fathers. Researcher credited with this insight, Melissa Emery Thompson, may be looking through a figuratively wider lens to study non-human societies than some of her peer anthropologists. We'll come back to this later in the episode. Taking a wider angle for addressing misogyny, inclusive of more culture and more species, is the focus for today's episode. To be personal here with you, my reason for wanting to connect with primates is both instinctive and tied to the grief that I've held for decades about the declining health of trees and tree ecosystems, and the fact that all of us need trees to be healthy so that we might live healthy lives. I have run out of my house in my pajamas to stop a utility worker from cutting a tree in my yard. I have stopped to talk with a contractor cutting trees by a watershed day after day with my child who was already late for school in the car. I have followed an empty logging truck down a long dirt road knowing it was going to be filled within a few hours to ask him for information. When I look at who is on the front lines of the assault on trees, I see the same white male demographic time and time again. And my heart understands that being the provider for the family and clinging to a belief about job security and a paycheck as paramount to stability is part of the challenge in stopping the assault. Basically, I'm hoping that our primate relatives might have some insights on how us humans can more deeply respect trees and each other. And hopefully you can see the connection I am making between cutting down women with acts of misogyny and cutting down healthy trees. Remember how episode 1 covered the parts of women that get used to sell advertisers' products? Well, tree parts, or board feet of lumber, are used similarly. Let's ponder that for a few days. Audre Lorde calls the act of ignoring the deeper wisdom of another, using them like a Kleenex. Lorde also says, to use without consent of the used is abuse. Switching gears a moment here, I'd like to share that in a recent BBC article by Angela Saini, I read that at least 160 still existing matrilineal human societies have been identified across the Americas, Africa, and Asia. Saini writes about ancient gender-blind cultures and states that thousands of years later, in cities like ancient Athens, entire cultures had developed around misogynistic myths that women were weak, not to be trusted, and best confined to the home. Even I, after all the years I've spent agitating on misogyny and declining tree health, am inclined to gloss over that statement and figuratively put my head under the covers. Can we imagine for a moment in what world were women weak, not to be trusted, and best confined to the home? I can't, but we can make space for that history. And of course, if you've read Rianne Eisler's book, Chalice and the Blade, this is not news to you. It is refreshing to learn of research that pinpoints the origins of the patriarchal order, as we discussed in the first episode in this misogyny series. But what about the generations of women and men needing to now extricate all that biased cultural learning? How is it locked away in the body, mind, or even the soul? I read about a study that delivered electric shock to rats and released a fragrance of orange blossom into the air at the same time. It proved that 5 generations later, offspring continued to be paralyzed with fear when smelling orange blossom. I believe humans hold ancestral trauma similarly to these rats and may find the act of healing deeply held beliefs overwhelming, even while they're getting heartfelt feedback from many people that they must change. Humans can also be very resistant to change in general. Even those of us who aspire to be the change can have long stretches of resistance to change. There are big emotions that can arise in just trying to shift our perspectives and habit energies. How do we do this work? 2 solutions to the difficult nature of change, one on the micro level and one on the macro level, are embodiment practice and biomimicry. There are many good practices to keep ourselves healthy in body, mind, and spirit. The challenge is motivation. And yes, a good baseline of health can help to heal the effects of misogyny, as well as the effects that capitalism and climate change have on us. All 3 of these themes are tenets of this Mujéres Co-Labor for Peace show. Embodiment practice, to me, is like taking meditation and movement practices like dance and yoga and uniting them in real time. To breathe with the body, even though it thankfully breathes itself, is a key element of embodiment. Our heart check-in at the beginning of this show is an example of embodiment practice. This can be a personal thing or it can be a group thing, so long as the group members choose to listen to and speak from their personal embodied experiences. Biomimicry is the science of learning from strategies found in nature to solve human design challenges. There are people working on high-level cerebral answers to how we humans do this work of change in so many important facets of life. I'd like to play for you a 2-minute clip about the Biomimicry Ask Nature portal. You may find it really fascinating. For me, it is deeply humbling and also inspiring to witness nature's generosity.
Accessible online catalogue of nature's solutions to human design challenges. It is a dynamic and curated online library of nearly 1,700 entries, describing how living systems have adapted to thrive amongst the myriad of conditions and challenges found on planet Earth. You can ask nature your question in the search bar, or take advantage of the way that all biological information is organized by Ask Nature, by function. This powerful feature makes it possible for you to arrive with a design problem and learn how a variety of living systems solve similar challenges. Biological strategy pages greet you with illustrative media, plain language summaries, and linked references, so you can quickly gain a high-level understanding of the strategy before choosing to dive in deeper. Ask Nature also features curated collections, innovative ideas inspired by nature, and a growing library of educational resources that will help you teach and learn about biomimicry. Whether you're a student, educator, scientist, entrepreneur, or designer, Ask Nature inspires us all to ask, how can we learn from nature to live sustainably on our shared home, planet Earth?
And there are simple things we can do to come back to our own bodies, to learn to hear and to listen deeply to our brilliant emotional signals that show us how to coexist with ourselves, with one another, and all life on Earth. I think mindful breathing is a critical step in healing from and blocking ongoing harms from acts of misogyny. It's a big statement. I am learning to breathe mindfully with other people. Community can be a somewhat elusive concept for me generally. I'm not thinking of community like that which is showcased in the movie It's a Wonderful Life. I'm thinking of community like that which our primate relatives know, like that which our indigenous brothers and sisters know and practice. Community that begins with deep respect and curiosity for that which emerges through one another. Community that understands its interdependence on other healthy ecosystems. And something about living in a large pod of humans is really attractive to me. It could be the antidote to pervasive isolation. Community is needed to confront misogyny in society, in healing personally, and in building one's capacity to challenge, or as Loretta Ross says, call in another person who is subtly and perhaps chronically harming us. This is less of a gendered thing and more of a thing of will. Do we have the will to understand the subtle and gross ways in which women are disempowered? Do we have the courage to want all women to experience power? What do we believe about powerful women? Do we associate successful women's power with the evil that Disney's fairy tales like Maleficent have acculturated us to believe and continue to perpetuate even as a few empowered younger females like Moana demonstrate power? These questions can lead us to reflect on our familial, chosen, and biological relationships. What did our parents model for us? How does that still affect our worldview, our love relationships, our friendships, and our working relationships? I asked myself, Ren, perhaps a deeper dive into evolutionary anthropology and the work of Melissa Emery Thompson can help. Thompson co-directs the Comparative Human and Primate Physiology Lab at the University of New Mexico. I found some cool connections between adolescent risk-taking in humans and non-human primates, as well as the continuation of strong relational bonds to older female primates. One study noted that older apes are just as social as younger apes, but more selective, leading them to conclude that humans' motivations are more primal than they originally thought. Beyond that, I got stuck in a rabbit hole of research, though I really like this image here. I was looking for some commentary on societal challenges as large and long-standing as misogyny, and found a study completed 3 months ago about the exceptions of sex in Edwardian Britain. All the researchers are men, and without even going into detail, one sentence in the abstract, following the finding that variations of sex like intersex, sexual transformations, and females reproducing without males, which is called parthenogenesis, were key to understanding sex characteristics. Says it all. This embroiled the new sexological genetics and the developing discipline of reproductive physiology with vexed debates about feminism, homosexuality, and eugenics. It went on to mention ensuing tensions across scholarly and popular platforms and Britain's newspapers. This reaction is an example of how really cerebral folks are tapping into societal emotionality. It's promising. We cannot expect change to be easy. We can, however, do our part to bring grace and compassion. It comes back to what we know in our guts. Conversation by conversation is how we undo and redo the behavioral patterns we've been conditioned into. There is a book that is coming to my mind, one that Charlotte Perkins Gilman wrote 110 years ago. It's called Her Land. And in Her Land, females reproduce without males. The story is fascinating and likely as relevant today as it was then. Because my personal goal for this episode was to connect the disembodiment of women for profit to the disembodiment of trees for profit, without activating too much emotion, I'd like to bring this episode to a close with a few reflections. Being deeply connected to the land and the trees we are all interdependent on, like our non-human primate relatives, and like unimpeded indigenous cultures still honoring Mother Earth on every continent, makes for a love and a resistance and a personal capacity of courage, of heart, that must protect her no matter what. With our tree siblings, like with our literal and societal sisters, we need to bring our curiosity in exploring understandings of her complexity and multidimensionality into fullness. To bring her whole in our minds and hearts and actions. To stop harming the beings who give us life. Their grace allows us to breathe, and instead of being in right relationship with her, we poison her, we pollute her. What if we sat and exhaled with her a while each day? What if we sang to her, our tree siblings and our sisters, from our hearts? It is clear that misogyny is a very big topic. Join me for more of the conversation next time in part 3 on Mujéres Co-Labor for Peace. I am Rianne Ribeiro, and I thank you for joining. This initiative is supported by Inner Fortune, the full-life self-coaching journal that is now digital. Join us for peace, and thank you for your heart.